Hello everyone, welcome to your Magic Weekend. Coming to you live from the capital of Spain, Madrid. It is time for day 2 of Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. Your host Rich Hagan alongside Pro Tour historian Brian David Marshall and from the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour Hall of Fame, Randy Buehler. Welcome along. Guys, we had a tremendous day yesterday. Pretty tough question to open up. Name one highlight.
Archangel Avacyn. Michael Majors, Archangel Avacyn off the top to survive combat, untap, and kill Christian Calcano.
Randy, for you.
For me, it was crazy new standard decks. I fell in love with 2 different black-green decks on the same day. There are some sweet, sweet tech out there. Band Company is not the boogeyman. I was just happy to see. I mean, if I had to pick one moment, it's probably Luis just combo killing. He had a feature match where he had a turn 4 win, turn 5 win. That deck just looked insane.
Yeah, for me, in a way, it was looking at the standings at the end of day 1 and knowing we were going to get up this morning and find that Luis Scott-Vargas and Brad Nelson will play each other in round 1, round about an hour from now, which is just an extraordinary start to day 2. So if you missed yesterday, well, go back and watch it all because it was great, great stuff. Why don't we explain to you, though, if you are new, you're very welcome. Thanks for being part of our Magic Weekend, letting us be part of yours. Why don't we look at how this whole tournament thing plays out? So, Randy, the schedule, what we did yesterday, what's coming today, and eventually tomorrow.
Yeah, day 1 and day 2 have the same basic schedule. First you do a draft pod, 3 rounds of draft, then we go to standard decks and play with 5 rounds of standard. At the end of, it'll be 16 rounds, 8 plus 8, top 8 players go through to Sunday. Sunday is all standard. It is all best of 5 in that single elimination bracket, and also, for the first time, 2 games unsideboarded. You don't get to use your sideboard until game 3 of those best 3 out of 5 sets on Sunday.
Yeah, and I guess it won't be until we actually see that in action that we find out just how critical that's going to be. So, BDM, in terms of matches, we award points. Give us the scoring system.
It's pretty simple. It's 3 points for a win. You'll hear people talk about getting to 36 points before the last round, which is 12 wins. And then maybe get that 1 point, which is a draw in the last round, to lock themselves for the top 8. That's where you obviously get no points for a loss, and what you're really looking for is, 12 and 3 and 1, 13
Some of the
and
12
3.
fours usually get in, but not all of them for sure.
Yeah, maybe 1 or 2. So,
Randy, a couple of important matches in the first round today. Jeremy Dezani and Shota Yasuoka played in the Swiss last night in Constructed and drew, so they're 6-1-1, and because they're in the same pod, it looks like they will play first thing this morning as
that's
well.
how spares work.
So that's with this weird draw. Meanwhile, for Luis Scott-Vargas and Brad Nelson at 8-0, the winner there, if 12 wins is the rough bar, the winner of this first round match needs to go 3-3 through rounds 2 through 7 today to then shake hands in the last round. The loser then is back in the 4-2 and needs to put up a good run.
Yeah, there's actually a little bit of a scary thing too. 8-0 on day 1 of the Pro Tour, it's a little bit of a curse, not psychologically, but if you lose that match, you can get paired against somebody who was 7-1 and 1. So like your 0-1 deck that didn't quite work out sometimes has to play against a 1-0 deck that did, and it's actually depressingly easy if you talk to like a Luis or a Brad to put up a bad result after an 8-0.
Yep. So, I mean, what would Brad Nelson take today, for example?
Yeah, I talked to him this morning, and he was just like, 1-2 is the goal. I just don't want to 0-3.
Wow.
Just get me to Constructed at 1-2. Well, look, this pod is insane. This is a guy who played the World Championships last year, and he's like, this pod is harder than any of my pods at Worlds were.
Well, you are going to see Alan Wu, Dan Lanthier of Canada, Luis Scott-Vargas, John Finkel, Katsuhiro Mori, Seth Manfield, Valentin Mackel, and Brad Nelson. 8 come in, only one of them goes 3-0. Well, let's see how the cards fall out. It's time for the day 2 draft here at Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad.
And good morning from the booth here in Madrid. Marshall Sutcliffe with Ian Duke from Wizards of the Coast R&D. And we're ready for our draft here on day 2. Ian, yesterday was super exciting.
Yeah,
we had a lot of awesome stuff, and I expect even more of that today. Let's set the table. Let's see who we're going to see. I got to say, this is one of the most stacked pods I've ever seen in my years here in the booth at the Pro Tour. It is absurd. Look at this. Seth Manfield, Valentin Mackel, Katsuhiro Mori, John Finkel, Luis Scott-Vargas, Dan Lanthier, Alan Wu, and then there's a Brad Nelson. Now, we're going to start off the draft here by watching Luis Scott-Vargas. So we're going to see him. He's currently 8-0 in the tournament. Brad Nelson also 8-0. You can see sitting a few seats away from him. But we're going to start off with Luis. We're going to record Brad's draft so we can watch that later on. But for now, let's head down to the feature match area for the draft on day 2 here from Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Ian Duke, and we are all set for our draft here on day 2. This will be the last limited action of the day and of the tournament, in fact. 3 rounds will follow, but for now, we get to watch Hall of Famer and currently undefeated player in the tournament, Luis Scott-Vargas, manage his way through the Shadows over Innistrad draft. He's got a lot of strong opinions on the draft format. He's got a few decks that I know he happens to like, and I'm really curious to see where Luis goes here. Yesterday, he drafted Black-Red Vampires, and it was an amazing deck. He gave it a 10 out of 10, and he did really well with it. He looks like he's opened up a Lightning Axe here, Ian.
Yeah, Lightning Axe, just one of the best red uncommons, one of the best uncommons, period. Great way to start a draft. It's a powerful removal spell with a lot of synergy bonuses added on.
He's got a Pious Evangel for his double face card. I will remind you that the players are playing in sleeved cards here, so they do not have to do the whole reveal thing. This was done just to make sure that the playing field was evened out for all of the players, as it can be a little tricky to see all the way across the table. Mm-hmm. And our tournament organizers received some feedback from the Grand Prix prior. So they are sleeved here, and it's drafting kind of like on Magic Online.
Yeah, that's a very, very similar comparison.
Lightning Axe is what Luis Scott-Vargas takes. Let's see what route he ends up going down here today. Again, Black-Red was his deck of choice yesterday. He 3-0'd the draft with it.
Yeah, and Lightning Axe could lead you into Black-Red. It does have synergy with Madness cards, which are centered mostly in black and red.
Yeah, he's picked up another very powerful uncommon here, Ian. He's got a Nearheath Chaplain pulled to the front. One of the better uncommons in the set.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's just, pretty good stats and then the great value out of the graveyard as well.
And he is, in fact, going to take the Nearheath Chaplain. So he's got a red-white shell going here, though. Knowing Luis, he's going to stay open. He's going to look at these next few picks and decide where he wants to go. But heck, if he gets good white and red cards, he's going to take them, because we've seen that these aggressive decks have been very favored by a lot of the pros here. For as many different things as you can do in the format, combat tricks seem to have ruled the day yesterday.
Yeah, that is true. Although Lightning Axe and Nearheath Chaplain doesn't necessarily point you toward an aggressive deck, and that's what you want to be in when you're white and red. So I think Luis will consider keeping his options open here and being either white or red. Is that a Fevered Visions? That's an exciting card.
It is, yeah. This is the type of card that goes incredibly well in basically one archetype, which is a tempo-based deck that can really capitalize on the extra cards and the fact that it's doing damage to your opponent. Most of the other decks don't really want it. Let's see if Luis takes it here. He's got an Inspiring Captain as the other card, and he took it.
I'm loving this, Marshall. This is great. This is a great start to a draft.
Put on your seatbelts, kiddos. This one, he could go very deep here. Fevered Visions, though, in the right deck is excellent.
So we're probably thinking...
another Fevered Visions!
Whoa. It's got to be the pick here then, right?
I think it's better than Ulrich's Kindred here, or Voldaran Duelist, excuse me. Oh, man.
This is an awesome start. So now we're on Lightning Axe and double Fevered Visions as the beginning to this deck here.
Absolutely. Oh, man, I can't wait to see where this goes.
Yeah, I mean, this could be, like you said, a blue-red tempo-ish deck. Maybe it could lead into a blue-red spells deck where you're just kind of churning through your deck and leading to like Rise from the Tides or something.
Absolutely. And, there are multiple versions of that blue-red deck. There's a Madness version, and, he could certainly lean in that direction with the Lightning Axe. He's got a Gibbering Fiend pulled to the front here. There's also a Rise from the Tides version, which you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. That's certainly one way you can go. And then the other way you can go, and it works quite well, and it might even be the way that Luis decides to go here. He's going to take a Rush of Adrenaline here, is a Pyrehound deck. You can pick up Pyrehounds. Luis and I actually were talking about it on the podcast, and, we put Pyrehound in the Build Around Me uncommon category, but it's a common.
Right.
It has that feel, though.
Yes, I totally agree with that. We actually sort of had the same note internally as well. But, the card was fun enough that we decided to leave it at common.
Yeah, and this is the home for it. Here's a press for answers. And I'm going to tell you what, Sanguinary Mage and Pyre Hound are going to be very high on Luis's list here of cards he'd like to pick up as he moves forward. He doesn't have a Rise from the Tides and doesn't have a ton of madness going. So basically, this deck is capable of running 10 plus spells. And by spells, I mean instants and sorceries, right? And when you start running that many, that critical mass, 15, I've seen decks with 15 instants and sorceries. Like, you can really push hard in that direction. Pyre Hound picks up +1/+1 counters for each of them and already has trample. It can become a real win condition. Same thing with Sanguinary Mage. It gets bigger only temporarily, but it can be the 2-drop of choice. Now, this is an interesting decision here for Luis. He took the Blood Mad Vampire, which leans him a little bit back towards the Madness version.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if he might take Dance with Devils there, just because it's a spell and it's a little bit more, I guess, defensive if you're going that route. But
it's actually what I thought he was going to take as well.
Yeah, given that he has the Rush of Adrenaline, he might be going for like a more aggressive, tempo-oriented version of this deck.
He picks up a Port Town here. Now, this is clearly a nod to the Nearheath Chaplain that he has in his pile, as it gives him the possibility to splash it. He's got, well, an Insolent Neonate here. So it does look like, of the 3 versions that we outlined, there's no Rise from the Tides. He hasn't seen a Pyre Hound yet, so he might be leaning towards the Madness version of this deck.
Yeah, these last couple picks haven't been thrilling, but there have been a lot of blue and red cards in the pack, so I don't necessarily think it means he's being cut off. He may just not be seeing the ideal cards for his deck.
Yeah, he took a Lamplighter of Selhoff there. Not an exciting card for his deck, but like you said, we are kind of winding down the pack here. He's not expecting to get key cards at this point.
Right, and a lot of the key cards, as you mentioned, are uncommons. So it's a lot of this is going to hinge on what he opens in the next couple picks of the next pack.
Ghostly Wings there for Luis. Another card that probably won't make the cut. Maybe it will, actually. Now that I think about it, Ghostly Wings could. You can put that on your opponent's creature and then discard a card to return that creature to their hand. And if he's got enough madness, maybe he just uses it as a madness bounce spell of sorts. All right, a Deny Existence is starting to wind things down here as he's got just one more pick to go.
And a Vessel of Volatility, the last pick, not something that's going to make his deck.
No. So the really, of course, crazy part about this is that he's got 2 Fevered Visions. And the question is, where does that take him? Where does he go from there? Right? That's the tricky part about this. Maybe I'm going too deep. Maybe he could just trigger Madness by discarding to hand size. That works, right?
It does work. It's a little weird, but it does work. But yeah, I don't know. I'm wondering, is Luis starting to get a little bit concerned here, because he did pick up the Lightning Axe and the 2 Fevered Visions is a great start to this deck, but I feel like the rest of the pack did not go that well for him. What do you think, Marshall?
I agree. Yeah, I think that he needs to find some direction here in pack 2. He's got a reasonable number of playable cards in his colors, but they're not really cohesive yet.
Yeah, this is a format where the synergies are so strong. You want to have a coherent deck that's trying to do a thing. You can't just jam a bunch of independently good cards together.
Right. All right. Let's see what he picks up here in the next pack. Nothing? A Daring Sleuth or a Howlpack Wolf? Were those the 2 best choices, really? Ugh. Not a good open here for Luis.
Yeah, I think he was really looking for like a directional uncommon or rare there.
Exactly. His rare was an Ulvenwald Hydra, the mythic rare. He's going to take a Daring Sleuth here. Yeah, Daring Sleuth is not really what he wants. If he can get it transformed, it's decent in his deck just because it has prowess on the other side. But, that's still sacrificing a clue is going to be pretty tough for him to actually get it transformed into Bearer of Overwhelming Truths. All right, let's see if he picks up something a little better here. He's got an Ember Eye Wolf pulled to the front and a Wicker Witch. Oh, no.
Yeah, these are not ideal cards for him to be picking this early. I mean, Wicker Witch is good at triggering Delirium, but that's not something that's key to his deck so far, especially being in blue and red.
Is Luis forced to just take an Ember Eye Wolf here?
I think he might be.
Oh, he is going to be miserable with this.
Yeah, I think so. He's got to be, I don't know, getting that sinking feeling right now. But, I mean, one way to go with this is just to go for a hyper-aggressive deck, playing these kind of dorky 2-drops and following up with Fevered Visions and then trying to back it up with combat tricks like Rush of Adrenaline. I mean, that is a path that he could go down here.
This is just absurd. He is just getting nothing here. He's got an Inner Struggle, which is a perfectly fine card, but look at this pack.
Yeah, not much for him here.
I mean, is it possible he's being cut?
I find that hard to believe.
I do too.
I don't think he passed much strong blue or red. I think
this
the packs,
direction,
yeah,
right?
the packs are just not breaking his way so far.
Okay.
I mean, Inner Struggle is a fine addition. I mean, it is a removal spell that it's fine in any deck, but it's not spectacular.
All right, we'll see if things turn around for Luis. Again, he 3-0'd his draft yesterday with a very aggressive deck. And he's gone for something a little different today, and it is just not coming together for him.
Yeah, I mean, a Gone Missing, a Gatstaff Arsonist, a Lamplighter of Selhoff. None of these are great cards that he's super happy to have. I mean, I can see taking the Gone Missing or the Gatstaff Arsonist, just depending on how he wants to take his deck. But they're both, pretty mediocre 5-drops. You'll play them, but you're not excited.
Yeah, he might be piecing together something playable here as opposed to putting together a masterpiece. There was a deadweight in that pack as well. Mm-hmm. Not that it was really on Luis's radar, but now he's looking at a Stone Quarry here. Again, just keeping the opportunity to splash for white. He does have a Nearheath Chaplain.
Yeah, and that's pretty real, actually. I mean, sometimes when you end up with a deck that's not super cohesive, the next best thing to do is to try to be powerful, and splashing, powerful off-color cards is a good way to do that. He does have that Nearheath Chaplain, right?
He does. There's an Uncaged Fury. Sounds like the player directly on Luis's left, which is Dan Lanthier, is in blue, but not red. And so interestingly as well, one of the things that a lot of the pros have been saying about the format, and I've certainly found true for myself, is that you can split colors with another player, and you want these cards and I want these cards, and actually be quite happy to sit next to each other.
Right, that is a
cool.
characteristic of these high synergy formats.
Right. All right, now here's all the red cards. Now he just picks a bunch of them up here. I really do think it's just a symptom of there just happen to not be a lot of great red cards here. He's got a Voldaran Duelist, he's got another Insolent Neonate, a Ravenous Bloodseeker, Malevolent Whispers, He's going to go for the Bloodseeker here.
Yeah, so I think Luis is firmly now on the plan of just trying to be a blue-red tempo deck with some tricks and backed up by Fevered Visions for card flow, which is definitely a reasonable plan here. And I think given how the packs have broken for him, sort of his only realistic option.
And not that bad. I mean, look, if he can curve out and use Fevered Visions to gain a bunch of tempo advantage and damage advantage, he could be able to ride those to victory. Just doesn't have a lot of the core tools that I think he'd really like for this deck. Magmatic Chasm. Magmatic Chasm, I find it goes up pretty sharply in value when you're in a situation that Luis is in here where, he's kind of looking to steal wins.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and it's a card I'm really happy to have in my sideboard.
Uh-oh. The Hulk? Hulking Devil. He took it. It does go well with the Chasm.
Sometimes you just have to cobble together a bunch of brutes to get it done, Marshall?
Wow. Jeez. A+. That was great. I mean, I know we're watching Luis draft, but that was inspiring. Macabre Waltz here for Luis as he winds down pack number 2. And a Trail of Evidence is the last pick for Luis, which is kind of interesting. I don't know. He may take a glance at that while he's building.
Yeah, he might. This is one of those build-arounds that's a little farther out there, in my opinion. I haven't seen this work too well, honestly.
No, it's not very good.
Yeah, there are decks where it can happen, but it's definitely on the fringes.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be something Luis will actively want to have in his deck here. So, yeah, I mean, it looks like the plan is just a bunch of kind of dorky beatdown creatures, some tricks, and then the 2 Fever Visions, which admittedly is a very powerful card. There are times when you're just on the play and your opponent's playing maybe a slower blue-green deck or something, and they just can't empty their hand. The card is Cantrip, Howling Mine plus Black Vice in a way.
Wow, that was a lot of lingo.
A lot of lingo.
Cantrip, Howling Mine plus Black Vice.
Also a little bit of an exaggeration.
Yes,
but I mean, the reason the card is so strong is unlike most symmetric draw effects, you actually get to draw first. So it sort of replaces itself. That's what I meant by Cantrip.
Yeah, that's a big deal though. Having read the card, it was kind of hard to evaluate, but having actually played with it, I thought, getting that card back is huge, right? It sets that teeter-totter back in your favor, or at least makes it evened out.
Right.
Okay, it looks like Luis is on to his third pack here. Oh, there's a Pyre Hound, and I believe I saw an Aberrant Researcher. Yes, I did.
Okay, so these are some great cards. Forgotten Creation
as well. Yeah. Wow, this is a tough one. I think he could go pretty happily with any of these. The Researcher hits very hard, and he does have enough spells to actually get it transformed.
Yeah,
but the Pyre Hound is a solid choice in
I think I like the Researcher the best out of these 3.
Okay.
Although they're pretty close. I think that he doesn't actually have that many spells in his deck right now, and the Aberrant Researcher, it's just a Snapping Drake, right? It's just a 4-mana 3/2 flyer, which is fine as far as the floor for the card goes.
Quite good, actually. Yeah, Luis agrees with you, Ian. He's going to take the Aberrant Researcher here. See if he can't get something back out of that pack, maybe.
Yeah, there's always a chance the Pyre Hound comes back around. I mean, you need to be doing a very specific deck to make that card work.
Another somewhat unexciting pack here for Luis. He does have another Nearheath Chaplain, and if he's committed to splashing, then he could take it. It's a great card, but it is a little tough just because Luis is going to be playing like a Plains and a couple of dual lands to make these things work.
Yeah, it looks like it's enough better than the rest of the cards in the pack, though.
Yeah, the only other competitor was Skin Invasion, it looked like.
Oh, yeah, that's a card I like, but you really need to be able to block to make that card work.
Right.
And his deck doesn't seem that good at blocking right now.
There was also attack very, very well.
Yeah, very true.
But Nearheath Chaplain, again, it's in the top, near the top of the uncommon heap in this set. The card's absolutely fantastic.
Near the top of the uncommon heath, Marshall.
As it were. And here's a Just the Wind now for Luis. This is what he was hoping to pick up way back in Pack 1 and Pack 2.
Yeah, Just the Wind, a great card. I think a card that has risen a lot in people's estimation after playing with the format a bit. Just those bounce spells are so powerful when they don't cost you a card. If you're able to madness that, for value otherwise, either off a looter or some other activation. A Lightning Axe. It's great tempo play.
Yep. Yeah, it's just been a pretty tough draft for Luis. He kind of settled into drafting this deck early, and I mean, the blue just hasn't been flowing for him, right?
Yeah, although I will say this pack is going a lot better for him than the second half of Pack 1 and Pack 2 went.
Though this particular choice doesn't seem very exciting for Luis once again. He's going to take a Graph Mole.
Yeah, just a card he doesn't want to go up against. We talked about this kind of Fevered Visions tempo plan being powerful against a blue-green deck, but, Graph Mole, a card that he would not want to face in such a situation.
Is that another Fevered Visions,
wow.
Really?
I like it.
So help walk me through this, because I've never seen even 2 of them in one deck before. Do they get better in multiples or worse?
They get a lot better in multiples.
So how does it, talk us through how it actually plays out?
So first of all, having multiples in play is just better because what you're trying to do with this card is make it so your opponent can't play out their hand quickly enough. They end up with a lot of cards stuck in their hand and then they're taking damage. Now, if that condition is met where they can't get below 4 cards, each of your Fevered Visions is dealing 2 damage to them. And also, once you play your first Fevered Visions, it makes it more likely that you'll draw into your second and then to your third. So they work together in multiple different ways.
I see. And of course, it makes it more likely that they're going to have the requisite number of hands to take damage because they're drawing multiple cards.
Right.
Love it. Okay. Win conditions acquired here for Luis Scott-Vargas. He's got 3 Fevered Visions.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty big pickup because in a 40-card limited deck, I mean, your chances of playing that on turn 3 are, with 3 copies in your deck are actually pretty reasonably high. If someone in the chat can get out the hypergeometric calculator.
I got it right here, buddy.
You got it? Okay.
I'm not kidding either.
Compelling Deterrent's a nice pickup as well. Even just casting this as a bounce spell is great with Fevered Visions, right? Because what you're trying to do is tax your opponent's mana so that they can't empty their hand quickly enough. And in some sense, like if you have, say, 2 Fevered Visions on the battlefield, casting Compelling Deterrence on your opponent's creature is just like a removal spell because they're not going to ever run out of cards, right? And they're going to have to spend their entire turn replaying it again, whereas they could just replay something else instead. There's a sleep paralysis there, but looks like Luis goes with the uninvited Geist, which, yeah, I mean, makes sense given his plan to just kind of try to beat down.
So I'm showing that he's 58% probability to have drawn one by turn 3.
And that's even without, mulligans taken into consideration too, right? So, yeah, that's pretty real. So Tormenting Voice, a nice addition to this style of deck.
Yeah, and these are the type of cards that I think Luis was hoping to pick up in late pack 2, let's say, right? But it looks like he's had to turn the corner a little bit on the deck there. Skin Invasion came back. I don't know if he wants it here. Like you said, not perfect in his list. Maybe he can make it work, though. It's got to be better than anything else here. Another thing to keep in mind as we work our way through the rest of these last few picks here, Ian, is that not all draft pools, right, of all the cards that all the players open are equal, right? Sometimes there's just a lot of awesome cards opened up in a particular pool, but since they're random booster packs, sometimes there's not. And I have to say, looking through what Luis was picking as he went through, I didn't see anything amazing going, where you're just going, oh, if he just would have switched to whatever, he could have had. There wasn't a lot of that going on.
Right. I mean, he did pick up the 2 Near Heath Pilgrims, so there is a possible avenue where he shifts into like white-blue or something like that, right? But again, yeah, I agree with you, Marshall. I didn't see any standout cards in other colors that if I were in Luis's seat, I would have moved in on those.
Yeah, and it makes it interesting from a big picture perspective as we take a look at Luis one last time as the players start packing up their cards, because you start to think, well, Luis's deck is kind of weird. It might be very good. I've never actually seen a triple Fevered Visions deck, I don't know for sure. But I think, maybe this isn't like, I don't think this is going to live up, for example, to the deck that he played yesterday, which had Olivia and, a whole bunch of awesome stuff. But at the same time, his list is going to be relative to the other lists at the table. It's that simple. And that is something that's easy to overlook, because sometimes you look at your deck, you're like, I'm not really that happy with this, or it's going to take a lot to get this to come together. But then you have to remember that you're playing against the rest of the cards that went through you, and sometimes they're not that good either, and your deck could be relatively quite strong.
Yeah, we talked about he was sharing blue with his neighbor passing left, right? So that also could have caused problems for Dan Lanthier as well.
Yeah, totally. So that's, of course, possible. And on top of it, the fact that he has triple Fevered Visions is just a huge question mark. Like you said, you outlined for us why it's better to have multiples, which is great. That's going to give Luis potential win conditions. But there's also this thing where you're casting these Fevered Visions and your opponent's turning creatures sideways, and they might be able to race, right? The Fevered Visions does kill pretty quickly, but if you take turn 3 and turn 4 off to cast the Fevered Visions, for example, and your opponent casts, a decent creature on turn 3 and turn 4, they're going to outrace you unless you can deal with their creatures.
Yeah, I don't think Luis wants to go up against, say, like a white-red aggressive deck or like black-red vampires, especially with lots of discard outlets, which is another factor here for Fevered Visions as well. But if he's playing against like blue-green, blue-black, green-white delirium, like those decks just might not be able to beat Fevered Visions at all, right?
Totally.
He's got 3 of them. So, yeah, I don't know. I want to say the draft didn't go that well for Luis, but like his deck has an angle to it. And I've never seen a deck like this before, I have to say, right? Triple Fevered Visions, you rarely get 3 of any rare, and this is a very special rare to get 3 of. So I'm really curious how this deck plays out, and I hope we get to watch at least one match with Luis.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. And I'll tell you what, you know, after the players are started to build, when we're back at the news desk, you and I can we'll go ask Luis, because this is one of those things where Luis could say, didn't really come together, not super happy, I'm going to see what I can do.
Yeah.
Or he could say, this deck is broken.
Right, like
yeah. I did it, you know.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and it's hard to say, again, because we have this question mark that is Fevered Visions, where you're just like, if he built his entire deck around a rare that he has 3 copies of, that could work. Like, that's an absolute, you know, we ran the numbers, right? He's going to be seeing Fevered Visions by turn 3 the majority of the time. And like you said, that's not even including mulligans, you know. So big question marks here for Luis Scott-Vargas' deck, but it looks like they're ready over in the news desk, so we'll send it over there.
Thanks very much to Marshall Sutcliffe and to Ian Duke. Now, if you're a fan of Luis Scott-Vargas, you should be a bit nervous, because when the guys in the booth say things like huge question mark and every other deck at the table might be weak too, that's not a good sign. Now, of course, he will 3-0 with triple Fevered Visions, but nonetheless, LSV fans, edge your seat time through the morning. We'll see how that progresses. But it was a totally stacked top table. Brad Nelson was in there. Valentin Mackel, 6 Grand Prix top 8s. Alan Wu, John Finkel, one of the greatest players of all time. Reigning world champion and number 2 ranked Seth Manfield. 2005 world champion Katz Hiramori. 2-time Grand Prix champion Dan Lanthier. Well, it's no surprise that all the best cards went early, because they can all read at table 1. Now, one of them was Brad Nelson, and we had a camera right behind him for every pick of every pack. So let's send you across to the video wall, Brian David Marshall, Randy Bueller, and every pick of Brad Nelson.